Okay, so I want you to write this and put this in your arsenal, which I think is super important to do. Number one, first question, let's kind of get to it. I want you to do this when you're asking these questions. I want you to write it down. Make sure that you write the answers down when you're face to face with them so you can do what? Go back to it, repeat it, and have them repeat it. Because I need them to own it visually, auditory, kinesthetically.
Hey, this is Blake Sloan. I've been selling real estate over 14 years. Our team of highly trained professionals, along with our unmatched marketing, has sold thousands of homes here in the Myrtle Beach area, and this is how we do it.
So, first question. Number one, what would that look like? Keyword is what do you think keyword is? Look. So when can I use that? What would that look like? Yes, when they're telling you what they want, I need them to visualize that. Well, I want to, this house, we have our own thing. We want to, be where we can have the right school district. And okay, great. What would that look like? And I need them to do what? To pause and to start to do what? Visualize. And I have to pause and get them present in the moment and start visualizing their head in a way where it can almost become real to them and they can describe to me what it's going to look like. The problem with most people is they don't actually really even know. And so the more leverage I have once I start asking the question, I'm going to use this multiple times through the process. I'm going to say, look, let me ask you this, what would that look like? And I'm looking to put clarity with the words that they have or looking to put some more stuff with that. And a lot of times, this is a wing dinger for a lot of people because most people tend to talk, like we mentioned, in very vague bullshit. And so when I do this, we're looking to put feelings into form. It gets their brain to visualize and start to visualize it in a way that now all of a sudden this becomes real. And I'm going to go through that in the process, and I'll make sure I'm asking this question all the time. And it helps break up the questioning into more of a conversational piece because what do they start doing all of a sudden? Telling you stories and going deeper. And so I need them to go deeper in their stories. And what this does, it elevates the vague bullshit into more specifics that they're getting out themselves. And I'll make sure I include both people in the conversation, husband and wife or whoever it is in that scenario, whoever the decision makers are. Right? So they're telling me more about things. Right, let me ask you this. What would that look like? Very, very important piece there. Now, what's going to happen sometimes, they're going to get stuck. And so at that point, you're going to go to consultant mode where I'm going to start leading them along a little bit. Okay, how do I do that? I get good at telling a story. I'm going to tell my own story in that process. I'm going to tell a third-party story about someone similar, and that's going to lead me to more questions from them. So just know, if you start to get stuck, what do you do right here to get more out of them? Story. Either yourself or third party. Super important here. Because I want to keep this going as long as possible, get specific as possible, because the more specific I can help them get in their visualization, in their auditory way they're saying it, the more leverage I'm going to have on them on the back end. Because here's the deal, it's their words, not mine. And so it's very, very important for me to understand that and look at that piece overall. Second question here. After I tell a story, after I tell a third-party story, and also as I go through the presentation, I'm going to ask this same question. The question is, what are you hearing me say? What am I looking there? Not necessarily paying attention, but what else?
How they're processing what you're saying.
I'm looking to understand how they're processing what I'm saying. The biggest gap we have both on the listing side, also on the buyer side, is what you're saying to your client. You're making the misinterpretation that they actually are hearing what you're saying, or that they're actually comprehending what you're saying. And so part of what you're going to do in that question is, one, you're cross-checking them a little bit to help them understand, hey, look, repeat back to me what you're hearing me say right now. And on the flip side, I need to understand that they understand what's going on. A lot of times we let this go unchecked and we tend to bulldoze them. And so what's happening is we're not utilizing this psychology piece here at the deepest level as we should. So tell a story, tell a third-party story, tell an example. Hey, great, appreciate that. Let me ask you this, John, what are you hearing me say right now? And I want to have the right energy, the energy of connection, energy of curiosity, and the energy to make sure we're on the right track. Now, you can also layer this question where? In your presentation over and over and over. So if you're not asking enough trial closes in the presentation, pause and ask that question. Hey, look, let me ask you this. What are you hearing me say right now? Right? Super, super important to make sure we're doing. Third question here. Very similar number one, but I'm going to rotate it based on what it is. What would that sound like? What am I getting them to do there? It's very similar to number one, but it's a way to ask a similar question in a similar way. What would that sound like? Would see what?
Depending on their picture, and can just make it more real. What they're looking for at the end. They want an oceanfront condo. What would it sound like bringing up the ladies everywhere?
Yeah, you can do that piece. Or even, hey, look, they're about their situation. Well, I want to get out of my mother-in-law's house, and I want to. Great, if you had to describe that to me, what would that sound like?
How they would feel about it.
And I want them to tell me, and I'm looking to extract feelings based on their conversation, what they're saying. Okay, it's kind of like similar to what would that look like, but when I say what would that sound like, tell me more about that. And if that was the case, what would that be like? And so what happens is they're giving us very vague answers initially, and so I need to do what? Take it deeper. And so this is how I'll take it deeper and take it deeper and take it deeper. Well, we'd have our own house. Okay, great. Let me ask you this, what would that sound like? If you had to break that down, what would that be like? And so they tell us that, and then all of a sudden, they go one layer deeper and one layer deeper, and I say, great. Because what happens is, in their mind, they're very vague themselves. And so if I can help them uncover and get very specific out of vagueness, now all of a sudden they'll be much more connected to me as what? As their leader, as their person who's guiding them in that process. Okay, and so, hey, if you had to tell me how that worked out and how that comes down about, what would that sound like? We get our kids in their own house, each have their own bedroom. Great, what would that sound like? Right? Whatever it is in that scenario, I want to be able to make sure I alternate between those two questions, between what would it look like, what would it sound like? And I'm having them what? Repeat it and go deeper in that situation. So what would that look like? Right? I'm going to ask it over and over and over. I'm going to tell third parties where it's going to have that. I'm asking the question here, what do you hear me say right now? That's also in the presentation. And also, what would that sound like is a deeper one for us to make sure we're doing in that scenario. Right? And that's one thing we're talking about a lot in our coaching groups. If you want to double down and dominate in life right now, there's two main things that you need to study. What do you think they are? Psychology and people. Psychology and people. We're talking about this a lot lately. Regardless of how much AI, of how much robots, all this stuff, the deeper I can understand people and psychology, the more I'm going to win this game. Especially right now, if you look at what's happening around everybody, if you're able to deal with upset and stressed out people, the better you're going to do in business, the better you're going to do in life. Number 4. How would you know? This is a great one to also ask when you're talking about working or not working. So what's been working for you in your life so far? What has been working for you so far? What can you say? How would you know? Now, you can't come to them like you're grilling them. You have to have deep rapport here.
Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, how would you know? You have to have a great tone with this. This also can be about what they want in terms of their peak. So what they're looking for and what they want. I'm going to say, look, if we had to get that, how would you know? We found the right house for you that matched everything, how would you know? Well, I feel the right way. Well, if you had it, what would that feeling feel like? I'm painting the picture before we ever get there, which is how you're going to show a lot less houses and get a lot more contracts. Because what am I doing there? I'm pre-framing them on what to recognize when the right one comes along. And so I want you to understand that there's all kind of different variants of every one of these questions based on the scenario. These are just bases for you guys to be able to use so you can go deeper with that when you understand your people there. Does that make sense there? Super important piece there. But how would you know it's super powerful? If I found the right one and I got the right offer, whatever it is. Well, let me ask you this. How would you know? This is one that's my favorite one. The next question. I want you to ask every single person that's a listing with you or a buyer with you. And that question is, why is this a must? I would word it, why is this a must for you right now? Why is this a must for you and your family right now? Let me ask you this, John. Why is it a must for you right now to get your property sold? Oh, whoops. For you, right now. Now, what are they doing there? I'm having them create urgency, and then I'm going to use this on the back end every single time that they start trying to pull out and get scared. Let me ask you this, John and Mary. Why is this a must for you right now to get your house sold? Why is it a must for you right now to get to Florida to be with your grandkids as they're growing up? And I need it to be what? Their words. I need it to come from them and their heart and their soul and their brain so I can have that exact data to help them make a decision at the end when it's tough and the price is not the price they want. Or when they're buying and the price is a little more than they want to pay and the rates are a little bit higher than they want to pay, I go back to what? This piece, this moment, this exact reason why it's a must. And what we talked about is about 95% of the time they're going to give you a must. 5% of the time you're going to get a bullshit answer that says, well, it's not really a must for you right now. And what am I going to say? And tell me more about that. Let me ask you this, John. How would you know if it was a must? Are you going to wait too long till your grandkids get to kindergarten? What grade's enough is enough for you? Yeah. What would a must look like for you? What point is it a must for you? And so I can interchange these over and over and over, but this right here is the most powerful question I think in the whole bunch that I want you to add in every single presentation. Why is this a must for you right now? And I make sure I ask both people, both decision makers right there, because guess what? One most likely is going to expose that the other one's full of shit. Typically, the husband's going to be a hard ass. Typically, the wife's more realistic. She's been wanting to see the grandkids for the past 6 months, but the husband's trying to get more money for the house. And then all of a sudden, she's going to really reveal what the true issue is in many cases. And now, I have what? Leverage. Leverage, 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 leverage. And so I'm no longer an order taker. Now I'm somebody who can consult them and guide them through the process at a high level. And here's the crazy part. Most people don't even understand the answers to these questions, so I go through an unlocked combination. And so as I go through the process and I process them as a human, then all of a sudden they come to this new reality and they start seeing the world with much more clarity. And if I help them see the world with more clarity or their situation with more clarity, what happens to trust with them? It builds in a massive way. And so not only am I uncovering the psychology here, I'm building trust with them because I'm helping them uncover and decipher the problems and chaos they're having in their life. Now here's the deal. They wouldn't have submitted to a website, talked to a salesperson, and booked an appointment to meet with somebody if there wasn't a problem they had to solve. Period. Now they're going to tell you they're just looking. But we all know they wouldn't have been on the website at 2 a.m. in the morning looking at 33 houses and favoriting 6 of them if there wasn't a problem they had to solve. And so my job as the expert is to understand what has them up at night looking at houses. What had them reach out to us and go to the website that they need to sell their house? What was it that had them submit for their home value? And what was the true scenario? And I uncover that through these questions right here. Number 6 is more of a statement question. I taught you all this a long time ago, but I want you to kind of have this. Let's consider the possibility. John, remember what you consider the possibility of that. This is like saying arguably, right? You can say arguably and put anything behind it and it's going to be believable. Right? You can say arguably I'm the best real estate agent in the world. Whatever it is in that scenario. And so what's happening though is most people tend to just talk too much in statements. You try to tend to tell people too much instead of asking questions. So what this does, this assures that when you say this ahead of time that their gaze, their mind is going to be opened up. And so if you go to something that's more of a statement, I need you to make sure you pre-frame it with this so that the mind is open more there in that scenario. Right? Basically, when I tell you next, I need your mind to be open is what that's saying. And you can say anything behind it. Well, consider the possibility, John and Mary, that there's a big reason that you all went to a website, typed in your address information at 11:35 p.m., and then you booked one for me to be over here today. Is that correct? So I'm not saying you have to sell, but there is a deep reason that had you reach out to a salesperson, and wanted to know more information about how to get you to X, Y, Z. And so this is a way for me to cross-check them in that scenario if they're giving me a little bit more bullshit and they're pushing back on me. And especially good follow-up to this one here if they say it's not a must. So go ahead and store it in your armory that if they say it's not a must, which is going to be a small percentage, that you can follow it up with. I want you to consider the possibility there's a reason that you went online and did X, Y, Z. But you called off that for sale sign. You're out searching for property that had you curious or whatever it is. There's some pain point, and our job here is to kind of figure out what that is. Make sense? And you can be open about it and say, look, John and Mary, I can't help you unless we understand what the true pain and the true problem is. And if there's not really a true problem, guess what I'm going to tell you? Stay put right here where you're at. Because I don't need your business, but I do value it. That's a takeaway in that scenario, right? And I'm going to go right back around and ask a different question in a different way so I can uncover what it is. But most people are very elusive in this process because they're scared that you're going to be a salesperson and that you're going to close it. Just like anybody goes into a store looking for clothes are scared to be sold. It's a human defense mechanism. And so as we go through this process, it allows us to unlock this and get a lot more leverage in the clients here in that scenario. Number 7. This is a great one for the presentation. Also after the discovery. What are you seeing from what we discussed? I'm doing this during the presentation. I'm doing this specifically when I get somebody into the gap. So once I realize I've gotten to the gap between their pain and their possibility, between where they're at and where they want to go, I start obviously talking about what we have, what we do, and I'm going to ask this question. John and Mary, let me ask you this. What are you seeing from what we discussed so far? This is my test question to make sure they're getting it. John and Mary, let me ask you this. What are you seeing from what we discussed so far? And as I do that, and as they tell me, those words that I said now become their words, and it now becomes real. And so now it's anchoring in what those 3 things that we must have, which is visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. I'm layering those in for them to make a good decision. Because here's the thing, if you make the overall process and they like what you say, and they think you're pretty sharp, if they have a gut feeling about you that's not good, what's going to happen? They're going to shut down. They're not going to buy or sell with you. This is a cool one too. Number 8. This is what you say when people say, I don't know. You ever have that? You ask questions to somebody, hey, look, what's going on? How would you know? And they say, well, I don't know. Let me ask you this. What's your criteria for picking a real estate agent? I don't know. That's what they all say, right? Because they don't really know, so my job is to help them get there. Here's a great one to say. Let's pretend for a second that you did know. What might that look like? Let's pretend for a second that you did know. What might that look like? And what do you think is going to happen? Can you see how these questions are a lot more ninja-like than the first ones? And so these are the ones you're asking in between the first 13 to help go to a deeper level. These are like the 303 level questions. Right? The first are like 101. These are 303. Well, let's pretend for a second that you did know. What might that look like? And they're going to say, well, experience, I don't know what, whatever it is. But then, worst case scenario, they're going to tell me what their hot buttons are and what they're going to make a decision on. And I think that's a question I'd ask every time I listing presentation. Let me ask you this, John and Mary. What's the criteria that you all put together to make sure you pick a real estate agent by? Well, we hadn't really thought about that. John and Mary, most people don't actually think about that, which is why I want to ask a question. Let's pretend for a second that you did know. What do you think that might look like to you all? What's your criteria you'd have in your head if you did know? And what are they going to tell you? Exactly what if they want a real estate agent. And then what am I going to do in the back end? Show them all those things that are exactly what they have in their mind of what they are. And that's from a question they just told me they didn't know. And as we talk about that in our coaching thing, is like 99 out of 100 people are going to tell you at that point, they're going to tell you exactly what the answer is, even though they just told you they didn't know the answer. Because most of them do, but they haven't taken the time to think about it or get clear on it. Or they're embarrassed of what their answer might be. Second favorite question here. Number one is, why is that a must? Number two, let's pretend for a second that you did know. What might that look like? Which is super powerful for us to make sure that we can use there. Number 9, last one. If I could wave a magic wand and you could have things exactly the way you wanted them to be, what do you see? There's a bunch of ways to ask this, but that's the clearest way. If I could wave a magic wand and you could have things exactly the way you wanted, what do you see? Say it one more time. If I could wave a magic wand and you could have things exactly the way you wanted them to be, what do you see? What are they going to tell you there? They're going to paint a picture, a perfect scenario of what they want their life to be like after this. And so what we're going to do there, we're setting what? The vision of the future. And once they start talking about the vision, whether it's going to happen on the inside, they're going to start to feel it and put themselves into that scenario, because a part of their brain that can't decipher between what's real and what's not real when they're visualizing. And so the better I am at doing this, the more I'm putting them into that place. And what I'm doing there is I'm widening the gap, and I'm creating more of a distance there between where they're at and where they need to be. And it allows them to start visualizing themselves what it's like. And then all of a sudden, the one that uncovers that tends to be the person that's going to help solve that problem for them. Very, very powerful. This is some of the most powerful shit we taught in a while, but it's just so simple. There's a couple ways to ask it. Another way, if I waved the magic wand over all the facts, you could have things the exact way you want them to be, what do you see? Like I mentioned, there's a couple different variants on how you want to do that, which is super important there. And like I mentioned, the goal there is have them see, hear, feel the reality where they're at, and the reality where they want to go.